Hashem. Today's Daf Yomi this is going to be recording for the Daf Yomi for Thursday. And so now we'll start on the bottom of Samach Gimel Amud Bey 63b at the bottom. So the Gemara, we're going to start towards the bottom of the Daf as it states around 8 lines from the bottom. Yosef Rav Nachman, V'u of Avimi, Bar Papi, Vyasa Rebchia Bar Ami Gabayos, Rebchia Bar Ami is sitting with these rabbis, Vyasa coming by and he asked them the following question. Now, let's say you hired the idolater, but you hired the Jew, but he was hired to break the Ayin Nesach. So the question is that going to be a problem? Do we say, given the road since he wants the Ayin Nesach to exist, so that he can make money by destroying it. Therefore, also he's not allowed to get benefit because he's benefiting by the existence of this wine that's prohibited. Or Dilma, or perhaps we say Kol Miyuta, or perhaps we say Kol Miyute Tifla Shapir Dummy, or perhaps we say everything that's here to diminish a tifla. Tifla is something that we don't want. Like tiflus, anything that's to diminish it is shapir dummy, is good. So even though he's getting a little benefit by being in existence for a little longer, since he's ruining it, it's okay. So Amar Rav Nachman, Yishbor v'tavo bracha. Rav Nachman says, let him break it and let him be blessed as a result of it. So he says, even though he's diminishing it, it's still a bracha to destroy it. So let's give a proof to this teaching. And so let's give it a proof to this teaching of Rav Nachman and Ula, but this basically is teaching of Rav Nachman because we have a brisa that says, "Ein odrin ima'ovi kachavim nekoyim." You're not allowed to plow with, or odrin is basically hoe out the area. You're chofrin. You're not allowed to dig with the idolaters to make koyim on top of 64a. Avo okrinimo. But you're allowed to uproot the koyim in order to destroy it. And even though it's the same similar thing, that you're diminishing, that you want it to exist until you get to complete your job. And you do this to destroy the part of it that you don't want, the koyim. So therefore, we have a brisa that specifically supports Rav Nachman's ruling. But then again, we don't know who exactly the author of this brisa is. Maybe it's a das yacham, maybe it's a single solitary position, and it's not necessarily the way we rule. So Savrua, so when they were teaching this, they thought, oh, maybe this price is only the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Because Rabbi Akiva says somebody who would just allow the koyim to exist would get lashes. And so therefore, just by allowing it to exist, it's going to be a problem. That let's say you planted koyim and then somebody else comes and makes a fence around them in order to make sure they exist. It's going to be, you get lashes. And so they thought that the author of this brisa that says that you're allowed to keep it, that you're allowed to destroy it, which means even though you want to keep it around for a little bit, is the position of Rabbi Akiva, and so therefore it's a direct parallel to the case of Yayin Nesach, which you're also supposed to, which is similar to it, and there's a problem with keeping around idolatry. Let's say somebody is hoeing or covering up the earth as it relates to koyim. Well, okay, you get lashes. Rabbi Akiva Omer Afa Mekayim. Akiva says, even if you just keep the koyim in existence, you get lashes. My time is Rabbi Akiva. What's the reasoning? Because the pasuk says, "Sad chalo tizra koyim," meaning say you read it as you can't have any koyim in existence. How do we know that you can't even have it in existence? Tam Omer lo koyim. So therefore, you read it as not as you can't even have the koyim in existence. But still, in this price, we say but if you're in the process of destroying it to keep it around, then you're allowed to keep it around a little bit longer. And so therefore, we assume that this is the position of Rabbi Akiva, and so therefore it's the same and so therefore this price is not necessarily a proof for Rav Nachman. So the Gemara says, no, who is this price like? Hamani Rabbanani, this price could even be like the Rabbanon. So who say who say we don't care if you want to keep it in existence. But Yayin Nesach, which is an idolatry, whereas the Jew is obligated to destroy the idolatry, therefore it's not a direct parallel to this case, because this is like the Rabbanon, who say that you're allowed to keep Kaim in existence, but Yayin Nesach you can't. And the Gemara says this price is like the Rabbanon. And so therefore it's not necessarily a proof for Rav Nachman. The Gemara says, no, Rabbanon Mayor Yaokun Afil Kiyuma Nami Shapir. So the Gemara says, why does it say it's the Rabbanon? If it's the Rabbanon, why does the Bryce say that you can uproot it with him? You're even allowed to keep it in existence if it's the position of the Rabbanon. You're not in violation of everything. The Gemara says, no, you're working with the idolater for free. The Rabbi Yehuda, and it follows the position of Rabbi Yehuda, who says, that you're not allowed to give a free gift to the idolaters. So the Gemara says, well, from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says this, means Rabbi Yehuda, Nishma, Rabbi Akiva. So, from the fact that we see that Rabbi Yehuda's position says that you're allowed to do it, you just can't, but you might have thought, in general, you can't give them a gift because you're not allowed to give them a free gift. But otherwise, in this case, it wouldn't be a problem. So we could see the position of Rabbi Akiva. Don't we see that Rabbi Yehuda says in general you're not allowed to give them a free gift, but if the free gift is in the process of destroying their idolatry, it's prohibited. But but if it's to destroy their tifus, then it will be permitted. Rabbi Akiva Nami, according to Rabbi Akiva, even though Rabbi Akiva says that you're not that somebody keeps the climb around, you get lashes. But to destroy the tifus is permitted. Visual media, and so therefore we see that this is exactly the same proof by the case of Yayin Nesach, that basically you're allowed to keep it around in order to destroy it, and so therefore that's going to be the proof for Rav Nachman's position. Then Hadar Yasviv and Kamibayu, and then they were sitting and they asked another question. So the same Rav Chia Barami asked the same Rabbanan another question. He says, so let's say an idolater sells his idolatry, he sells his idol, and he gets money for it as a result. So that the Mei Avodas Kochavim, Biyad Avodas Kochavim. And now he has this money. He sold his idol, he got $100. So now, what's the deal with that $100? Does the money attach to it? You know, like let's say somebody took $100 worth of illegal narcotics and he sold it. Now he has that $100. So does the money attach to the idolatry? Do we say tofeses does the idol that was sold attach itself to the money of the idolaters or not? So it's logical to assume that the money of the idolatry in the hands of the idolaters is permitted. And how can we prove that this money, since it's in the hands of the idolaters, is permitted? Midahanu, from the following case, also Kamei the Rav Baravua. That following case came for Rav Baravua. That they said that these following people had the following case. They came. These people came to Rabba Bar Avua, and they had the money that was that they had. Basically, what happened was they had idols that they sold them, and they got money for them, or they had idols, and then now they wanted to convert. So that was the case, and so these people came before Rabbi Bar Avua, and they wanted to convert. And so Rabbi Bar Avua said to them, "Zilu zabinu koma de islach. First sell it, v'su iskaru, and then you have the money, and then you can go and convert. So that way you won't lose the money." They came and they asked before they converted, because if it would be after they converted, they wouldn't be allowed to sell it. So we see from here that when you sell it while you're still an idolater, it's permitted to benefit from it when he's a convert. My time must be because he's out of the position. Mishum the to may avodas kochavim be out of kochavim must be because he's out of the position that the money of the idolaters in the hands of the idolaters is permitted. The Gemara says no, that's not necessarily a proof. Dilma Shani Hasa, maybe that case is different. The Kivan Daitale Gayure Vadai Bata. No, maybe because since these idolaters wanted to convert, so for sure they nullify the idolatry. And so therefore when they sold it, it wasn't idolatry. So Gemara says, okay, we'll bring a further proof to this, a different proof. El Mehacha. from the following case. It says, Yisrael Shaya no Shabbat Kochavim Mana. If there was a Jew that had a claim against an idolater for $100, Machar of Kochavim, idolater sold it, Ve'eviwo. Basically, he sold his idolatry and then he brought him the money. Or Yayin Nesach Ve'eviwo. Or he sold his wine and he brought him the money. Mutter, it's going to be permitted. So therefore, we see that the idolater can sell it and get the money and bring it to him. So basically, he shows that it's permitted. But now the Brisa continues. But if he says, "Wait for me until I sell the avodas kochavim vavilcha or yayin nesach vavilcha," wait for me. I'm going to sell my idolatry. Wait for me. I'm going to sell my wine. Aser. It's prohibited. And now the Gemara has already answered the question that in this case would be allowed. But first, the Gemara wants to know, Maishna Resha, Maishna Seifa. What's the difference between the two cases? Why in the first case is it permitted? And in the second case, it's prohibited. And it says Rav Sheshes, the reason why the Seifa is prohibited, why it's a problem, is Mishum Da'avei Ki Rotze B'Kiyumo. It's because it's like he wants the idolatry to continue to remain in existence. The Jew is rooting for it to remain in existence. The Gemara says, but wait, what's the problem with that? If he wanted to remain in existence, why is it prohibited? Then we learn in the Mishnah, let's say you have a convert and an idolater. So there was two idolaters, one of them converted, and now their father died. He's obviously not Jewish, and they inherit him. So Ove Kochavim. So Yorshu Avinu of Ger Yachol Omer, the convert could say, To'ata of Avodas Kochavim, you take the idolatry, Vani Mos, and I'll take the cash. To'ata Yayin Nesach, Vani Peros, you take the Yayin Nesach, I'll take the fruit. But Imish Borish Ager, but once it came into the possession of the convert, Asr, he's not allowed to do it. So we see there in that case, he wanted to remain in existence until they divided up. So we see from here that wanting it to remain in existence is not a problem. So what's the distinction between these two cases? So no, that's a case where the idolatry, it's not the idol that's worth money, but it's broken pieces of idolatry. And so therefore it has a value, when you could just sell the gold and or silver. And so the Gemara says, well, okay, that makes sense about idolatry, but yayin nesach ma'ikol neimer. Well, what are you going to say about the yayin nesach? Well, the wine, it doesn't have value as broken. The Gemara says, no, b'cheres hadriani. No, we're talking about it's talking about the Hadrianic wine. So he doesn't care if it breaks because he can still sell when it's broken, and because there the wine is remained within the pottery, as we had before. They used to store the wine in the pottery and then melt it down, and so therefore he wouldn't care if it breaks. Mar says, but still, but he wants it to remain in existence there, so that it doesn't, so they wouldn't steal it, so that they wouldn't lose it. Rav Papa says, no, the basic distinction between these two cases, why in that case is it going to be okay for the convert to get the money in cash and the idolater to get the idolatry, even though it shows he wants it to remain in existence. So he says, Yerusha Sager commerce, you're talking about the inheritance of a convert? Shani Yerusha Sager, we're going to be more lenient by the case of the inheritance of the convert. Rabbanan, because the rabbis were lenient by the inheritance of a convert. They were Shema Yachzor Lekakula, because we're concerned otherwise he'll return to his state of being an idolater. So therefore, we're going to be more lenient on the idolater. We have to be on the convert. We have to be sensitive to him, so he doesn't go back to his old ways. On top of Samach Tawan on the base, Tanya Namiach. Indeed, we have a brisa that says the same thing. By Bamedvar Mamorim Sheyarshu. When do we say that the convert can get the money and the idolater gets the idols, where they inherited it? But if they're partners, awesome, then we're prohibiting it. And so therefore we see that basically we're going to be lenient in the case of a convert who inherits, because we don't want him to go back to his old ways. So Yasvu becoming Bayalu. So then Reb Chibra Ame was sitting, and we had a third question. Ger Toshav, Maushe Bata Avodas Kochavim Depalach. So let's say there's a Ger Toshav. What is the definition of a Ger Toshav? This resident alien who was living amongst the Jews. Rashi says he doesn't worship idolatry, but he's an idolater. He was born like them, and he's an idolater with all the other sins, but he doesn't worship idolatry. That's what Rashi says. Different definitions amongst the Rishonim, and even the Gemara itself has a different conclusion, but of what a ger toshav is. But so the ger toshav, is he allowed to? Is he allowed to nullify his idolatry? Do we say to polach mevatel? Because in generally speaking, we say one who worships idolatry can nullify it. The lo polach mevatel, but somebody who doesn't worship idolatry cannot nullify it. Or do we say called the bar minei mevatel? Bar minei, or do we say anybody who's in a generally like from that group who's in a quote unquote an idolater in general, even though he doesn't worship idolatry, he's part of the idol worshippers. Therefore, he can nullify it, but anybody who's not cannot. Rav Nachman says, first case, Rav Nachman had a brisa. Then Rav Nachman, now he's not relying on a brisa. He's just saying, and in the second case, he had like a teaching. But now he has mistabra. Logical to say that one who is an idolater, who worshipped it, can nullify it. But since the ger toshav doesn't worship it, can nullify it. The Gemara challenges with the brisa. Meisvei Yisrael shematza avodas kochavim b'shuk. The Brisa says, let's say there was a Jew who found idolatry in a marketplace. Before it comes into his possession, he says, if he finds this idolatry, let's say he finds a gold statue, before the Jew actually picks it up, he could say to the idolater, an idolater can nullify it. But once he gets it, he can't tell the idolater to nullify because he already got it. Because they said, because they said an idolater has the right to nullify the idolatry of his own idolatry and also of his friend, whether he worships it or whether he doesn't worship it. So we see from here, even though the idolater does not worship it, he has the right to nullify it. What does that mean? The Gemara is going to prove that this price is a question on Rav Nachman. What does it mean one who worships it and one who doesn't worship it? If you want to say both cases are where it's an idolater, if you want to say in both cases, if you want to say in both cases, if you want to say that, hold on one second. If you want to say means that both cases, that both this one and that one, both the one who owns the idol and the one who's asked to nullify it are both idolaters. It makes sense why it says it's his and his and its friends. But if that's the case, that's already included in the first part of the brisa. So why does it need to say bein ovda ubein shelo ovda? Elolav ovda ove kochavim. So it means say the one when it says he worships it, that means an so if that's the case, elolav it must be ovda ove kochavim. Doesn't it mean one who worships it worships idolatry? Umaisha eno ovda, and the one who doesn't worship it is the ger toshav. And we see from here that the ger toshav can in fact nullify it, unlike what Rav Nachman said. Ushmamina ger toshav nami mevatel, that the ger toshav himself can nullify it. So Gemara says no. Well, in both cases, there are idolaters who worship it. Well, if that's the case, that's the first cause, whether it's him or his friend. No, the first cause is where both of them are either worshiping the same idolatry, either or they're both worshiping Markois. Seifa Zelapor Vizela Markolis. But the second cause is they're like two different faiths. One worships Por and one worships Markolis, and they could still nullify it. So it's not talking about a case of a ger toshav. Gemara again challenges Rav Nachman from a different brisa. Meisvei Ezu ger toshav. What's the definition of a ger toshav? Kol shekibo avifnei gimel chaverim Meir says the ger toshav is somebody who goes in front of three chaverim, a bezdin of three, and they point him, and he says he accepts in front of the bezdin of three that he's not going to worship idolatry. That's the position of Reb Meir. Sheva mitzvos. The second position, what's a ger toshav? The Chum say anybody who accepts upon himself the 7 Noahide laws. And acher moment. This is not going to be considered a ger toshav. They're not yet good enough to be a ger toshav. What's a ger toshav? Someone who keeps all the mitzvahs except he eats nevelos. He accepts upon himself to keep all the laws of Torah except he eats this non-kosher meat. So then the Brisa continues. Okay, so now that we've just seen a three-way dispute about what's a ger toshav, either somebody who doesn't worship idolatry but accepts it in front of a bezdin, or somebody who keeps the 7 Noah laws, or somebody who keeps all the mitzvahs of Torah except they eat nevela. What are we allowed to do with such a ger toshav? Miyachtan etzlo yayin, the imafkidun etzlo yayin, that we're allowed to keep wine with him for a short period of time, but we can't deposit wine with him for a long period of time. Even if it's a city where it's majority Jews. But so we're allowed to leave wine with him for a short period of time, but not for a long time, even if it's a city where it's majority Jews, but we can leave it for a short period of time, even if it's a city where it's majority idolatries. And then the Brisa teaches another law, Shmeino kiyeno, and his oil is like his wine. So first of all, the Gemara says, wait, we have to understand what this means. Shmeino kiyeno, do you really think his oil is like his wine? Shema mika havi yayinesach. Oil is not wine like yayinesach. Elayeno kishmeino. It means his wine is like his oil, meaning to say that the wine is permitted to have benefit, but you can't eat it. So this is a leniency. And for all other things, it's like he's going to be considered like an idolater. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Yeno yayin nesach. Rabbi Shimon says his wine is yayin nesach. And some say that Rabbi Shimon said mutter b'shtia. His wine is even permitted for drinking. So now the Gemara is going to tell us how this is a contradiction to Rav Nachman. Again, Rav Nachman said that the ger toshav cannot nullify an idolater's idolatry because he doesn't worship it. But it says for all other matters, he's going to be considered like he's an idolater. It says specifically shar called varav hareu ko avodas kochavim. For all other matters, he's going to be considered like he's an idolater, and so therefore he should be able to nullify the idolatry. Isn't it teaching us? Doesn't it teach us that he can nullify the idolatry like an idolater? Well, it's not. It's not to teach us that. It's litain rishus to levata rishus. Now this has to do with a specific law about making an erev on Shabbos. That in order to get to be able to build an erev chatzeres, to build permission into the courtyard to be allowed to carry there, you need to get permission of everybody in the courtyard, from every Jew who lives there. And just like an idolater cannot give permission or take away permission, so too a ger toshav cannot. So that's what it means. L'shar called varav. When it says for all the matters like an idolater, it's with respect to that. Ukidetanya, like it's taught in the Brisa. Yisrael mumar mishamer shabaso b'shuk. A Yisrael mumar who's basically a Jew who's a renegade Jew who is publicly observing Shabbos. Mevata rishus, he's able to cancel out rights in the courtyard. But somebody who doesn't keep Shabbos in public, is not allowed to be canceling permission in the courtyard. So it says that a Jew can cancel permission and give permission, but in idolatry, you have to do schliras rishus. You have to buy the permission from him. So that's what it's reflective. Kate said, how does a Jew cancel out his rights or give his rights? Omer lo reshusi kinu yocha, reshusi mevatel zocha. If he says to his neighbor, my right is transferred to you, or my right is taken away, kanav, ein tzarich lezakos, then it's acquired. He doesn't need to do a formal act. So we see from here that the idolater, like the Ger Toshav, they can't give their rishus just by saying it. It has to be schliras rishus. Okay, so this was the daf yomi for Thursday, so I'll stop the recording because now I'm going to record separately.